Glad to have you join us again. Now, the challenge to internet penetration and adoption in Nigeria is a multifaceted issue that has hindered the country's progress in the digital age. Despite being Africa's largest economy, Nigeria's internet penetration rate remains low, with only about 43% of the population having access to the internet. One of the major challenges is the lack of infrastructure. Nigeria's telecommunications infrastructure is underdeveloped, with many rural areas lacking access to reliable internet connectivity. The country's fiber optic network is limited, and the cost of deploying new infrastructure is high. Addressing this challenge, experts say will require a coordinated effort from the government, private sector, and civil society. Abiodun Omoniyi is an information technology expert. He joins us now to discuss the challenge to internet penetration and adoption in Nigeria, as well as infrastructure deficit and high cost of it. Welcome to Newsday.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Now, Nigeria has come a long way when it comes to internet penetration. There was a time when it was nowhere to be heard, getting on the internet or finding easy access to the internet. But now the world has become a global village, hence the need to optimize our internet connectivity. Let's talk about the challenges to this, especially when it comes to infrastructure. We know that recently the telcos complained about the fact that they have to increase their tariff, and then the federal government was against it. And so it looks like a potpourri of different challenges. Talk to us about this.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. Yes, everybody quests about internet, and of course, this is also expected to be driven by this private sector. Of course, again, it's not just about the private sector. A conducive environment needs to be created by governments. Governments at different layers. We have 3 tiers of government. So everybody needs to work together to make this a true reality. However, in terms of the challenges that you talked about, well, we need to know, the whole country itself is challenging. But for the internet service providers and communication companies in general, is a multifaceted challenge. One of it, recently you probably have been hearing of the different challenges. You're hearing about wanting to increase the tariff, but that is just part of the issue. We have the FX. Will I call it the regulation, the FX issue? No, there is no equipment. All the fiber optics you talk about, the equipment that would drive the signal itself, everything is imported. And that means high dependence on FX. Now, we know what FX had done in the last 1 year, so it affects the rollout. These people actually, they buy equipment in foreign currency and then collect payment in Naira. We've seen that the cost of everything actually had gone up due to that singular fact. So now, if that is the case, then definitely it's just appropriate that the cost of the services that remain in Naira be rightly priced.
Very good, Mr. Omoniyi. Yes, there are challenges. We acknowledge that, but there are also prospects as well. So, in terms of GDP, how has the adoption of internet services and social media contributed to Nigeria's economy? Can we quantify the benefits or lack of thereof, you think?
Okay, in terms of GDP, I think it's been well noted that the communication technology itself and the communication technology and digital innovation sector of the economy contributes between 16 and 18% of the GDP. And this looks huge because, everybody would have expected that the main contribution comes from oil, but that isn't so. So we need these services, communication services, whose benefit is what we are enjoying today. And most people are watching this program. A lot of people are watching the program courtesy of what we call the communication technology itself, the internet that we talked about right now. So now that in itself is one of the benefits. I mean, global connectivity, we're in a connected world as it is, where commerce happens, where digital literacy, so many people actually live in Nigeria and they work anywhere in the world. So now we have banking services. Most people have not gone into banking. I mean, the rate with which you collect cash is actually much reduced.
Yes.
So all these are actually powered by the internet. It's powered by the connected world. So digital literacy needs to then be brought in so that we can actually bring in more people. You don't just spread out infrastructure without having people. Yes, we may have population, but for anybody to get onto this world that I'm talking about, there has to be certain level of education. We talk about telephone penetration, but how many of those actually carry internet? So now, so we have the other ones that goes by the fiber optics. So because she talked about the rural area.
Yes.
So how many people actually use smartphones in the rural area today? So all these needs to be taken into consideration to really know the real volume that are really ready to access this digital highway that we're talking about. Fine, it could actually, the opportunity is there because of many things happening there, on the internet. The agriculture can also be, the last speaker just talked about the importance of actually using technology to drive virtually everything, e-government services and everything like that. We're going to get there, but there are a lot of things that are also, a lot of foundational things that we are still grappling with that needs to be put in place.
Now, I'm interested in how data is being gotten, especially because if you must extrapolate or you want to get the number of people you should provide accessible internet for, then we must have data. And I know that in a country like Nigeria, there is still that challenge of data. We've not even conducted population census since 2006. So apparently there is still a lot to do when it comes to collation of data. You talked about the rural areas. Yes, we know that in the rural area, there is still a huge limit to internet access. And that's because many people do not have access to smartphones even there because of even the rate of poverty. But we don't even have the data. When it comes to, even our population generally is still in speculations. We rely on the United Nations and other Western, organizations. So what is the role of data in this, and how can we deal with the issue of lack of data in Nigeria?
Data is important. It's important in everything we do. But I would rather look at it in other way. Yes, it's good that we conduct population census truly, but there are also other ways of estimating data.
Okay.
So now there are remote sensors that will actually tell you due to the body heat of people, and this could be through satellite. It's also, satellite is another form of digital communication. So now this could actually tell you the estimated number of people in a particular area. Now, the other issue is what is the agenda? Maybe that
sorry,
will
let
not
me
tell us
pause in
that.
there. Are we using that satellite you just talked about? Are we using it to get data?
Oh, yes, definitely. These days you use Google to travel, sometimes to find addresses. So all those data, those sensors could give us an approximate amount, not exact. Of course, it still does not totally remove the issue of physical sensor, just to actually make sure that we reduce the tolerance, So even if the sensor tells you this is the approximate amount of people here, that is sufficient for a communication technology company to be able to do some planning. Now, then you go another level lower and say, okay, what is the grade? How many people are adults? How many are literate? How many of them do have smartphones, handsets, how many of them could actually, and you go into their banking details as well. So it's more about stratification of this data, organizing it. So, but I don't really think that is the main problem right now. The main problem is the economy. So the main problem, so what has even been deployed, has it been totally
utilized,
consumed? So now, so what's been deployed, people can get it. I mean, the communication services companies can actually have a feel, have deployed infrastructure. So then I throw advertisement out there and make it easy for people to, anybody that wants the service. So I can start seeing people, I can start generating leads. And from those leads, how many of them am I converting? So now definitely in such an instance, someone, if I'm saying, if I say today that I have internet in your area, if you are not literate, obviously you won't access that. So the issue is not about knowing, yes, it's just okay to have an estimate of the population, but in terms of assessing the service, it has to be for people that are ready, people that are desirous of having that data. So having that service that we can, that are the truly useful customers of that service.
All right, Mr. Omoniyi, I'd like your thoughts on the issue of legislation towards internet penetration in Nigeria. How proactive has it been? You know, we're talking about creating the conducive environment for e-services to thrive, as it were. So, and does such legislation also address the ills of internet propagation in Nigeria regarding misinformation and acts of fraud as well? So I'd like your thoughts on that scenario.
Okay, on the legislation, I actually think we have a bit of something that looks robust in terms of legislation that takes care of everything from cyber crime to even physical crime, destruction of infrastructure. However, the issue is in enforcement. So we need to now take it into the level of enforcement. How much of it do we really, if there have been damages to infrastructure, what do the law enforcement people, what do they do? So now this has been very weak. So it's not, I won't say we lack legislation. We have some legislation. Of course, there are still things about that we clamor for in terms of critical infrastructure protection or acts that we're looking for. But yes, which is very important, but I'm even saying the basic ones that we have now are not being properly enforced. And that actually is a major drawback. It's not just to communication technology or the communication sector alone. Other critical infrastructure sector also need the enforcement of legislation, consequence management in terms of making sure that, yes, you may report, sometimes even government itself actually perpetrate the disruption of these infrastructures. So yes, so it's not about legislation, it's about people respecting those legislation and making sure that we build consequences into anybody that violates such
people. And I'm sure that would mean that nobody would be above the law. Because I know that in cases, I think you alluded to the fact that, you know, in some instances you find internet disruptions because maybe there's an election going on or there's a protest about to happen, and then you begin to wonder what's going on. In such instances, what exactly should be I know there should be some form of regulation or something to curb such instances, or am I wrong?
Yes, what I'm saying is that there is, in terms of regulation on paper, even in words, but the truth is that, so who enforces that those legislation or those regulations are actually adhered to? So we have unruly people, we have people that constitute laws into themselves, and of course, even when these people are pointed out, nothing is done about what they've done. And that actually causes a lot of disruption to services.
Yeah, but I know we've said a lot about the challenges. So where are we in terms of moving forward? I know that there's already, well, will there be 6G? I know there is already 5G. Will there be 6G internet? How are we doing? Are we making progress when it comes to internet penetration in Nigeria?
Oh, definitely, we're making progress. 5G was bidded for launch. Some people use it these days, but obviously, I also go back to the structuring that is being carried out in the country now is affecting the companies, the corporations providing these assets. So now, so that structuring needs to happen. If the FX had been deregulated, then obviously tariff needs to be looked at, because you can't keep the tariff at the same level that it was 3 years ago, and then
Forex
FX had actually gone up 5 times. So definitely there is an imbalance there, and that actually makes me to be looking at another industry that looks like this, the power sector. We keep on complaining about the power sector, and we say it's really not serving the masses. We are driving communications to that level. I want to say, God forbid that we get to that level, but we are moving towards that.
All right, thank you. We must appreciate you for your time, Mr. Engineer Abiodun Omoniyi, IT expert. Thank you for enlightening us, especially when it comes to internet penetration in Nigeria.